In this lesson, let's start to look at how we can break these expressions apart and use 3D layers to create kind of a library that we're able to create some expressions from. So let's go ahead and open this up. And so what we want to do is now, instead of sculpting a whole expression at one shot, we want to actually sculpt just the different pieces, and we want to separate those out in some way. So we can do that using 3D layers. Okay, so right now I've got the head selected. You can see I've got no 3D layers here, but I've got different slots that I'm able to add these in. And so just keep in mind that when you add a 3D layer, it's going to exist at a particular subdivision level. So I'm going to put mine at a level of 3 or 4 because I want to store mainly just the movement of the face and not necessarily the wrinkles. Okay, so just keep in mind that you can only have one 3D layer per tool, and it'll exist at a particular layer, or at a particular subdivision level. So I am going to put mine at level 3. And so now what I want to do is, just before I sculpt anything, go ahead and create a new layer. Okay, and I'll rename this. And now we want to start to name these things something meaningful. So let's call this brow left, and call this A. We'll say A is towards the center of the head. And go ahead and hit OK. Okay. So now, if we take our move tool, move brush, turn off symmetry, and now we want to focus on this part of the left brow. So we'll go ahead and say, I'm going to move this up. Okay, and you want to try to just move that inside part of the brow. Okay, you can still move up and down your subdivision levels. Okay, but any of that sculpted detail you want to happen at level 3. Alright, so we'll go ahead and put that on here. And so once we have that, you can see if I turn that off, it goes back to no sculpt. I turn it on, brings that eyebrow up. You can also dial in the intensity of that by changing the slider down here. And you can see if I go to 0, that's the same thing as turning it off. What I can also do is go beyond 0 into the negative, and that actually pushes it down. Although it's not exactly what we want there. Okay, but you can get a little bit of variation by using the negative. Okay, so if you want to use that, you can. Otherwise, you'd probably want to instead call this A up. Okay, so we'll turn this intensity back to 1. Select that and rename that. And if I can select that, rename that to brow left A up. Okay, and that's if you want to go ahead and do a down shape. So now let's go ahead and turn that off, create a new 3D layer, and now let's call this brow left B up. Okay, and on this layer, go ahead and bring the center portion of the eyebrow up. Okay. And you can do this at lower levels and you'll get a little bit more control over the shape, but you won't have the option for to deal with any of the wrinkles or anything like that. Okay. So kind of pull that up. You can check that as well. And now if we look at this, if we combine these, we now get something like that. Okay, so I can take the A up and maybe clean that up a bit. can see that that's what you get as a combination of these two. Okay. Alright. Let's go ahead and create some eye shapes. So we'll go ahead and create a new layer. Let's call this one eye left close. Alright, so this is another one that's going to be challenged here at level 3. More ideally would happen at a lower level, but we can make it work. So let's go ahead and close our eye up just by dragging this down. Pulling this lid up. Okay. That out a bit and up. And just close this down. Okay. Can mask that off. We're getting a little bit too much. Unmask that. And pull that down. Okay, and this time I'm going to do a little bit of sculpting here with my standard brush. Let's just kind of smooth this out a little bit. Smooth that out. Go ahead and pull out a little bit along this lid here, and you can see how this has been pulled out too far from the head. Let's go ahead and pull that back in. Just kind of smooth that out a bit. You can see at this level we don't have all the control that we'd like to have here, but that'll work for us. If you're doing this in something like Maya where you're pushing and pulling points, you will have a little bit more control, but things will go usually not quite so fast. And you can always tweak these things in Maya as well. Okay, so let's say that's our eye closed left shape. So again, I can close that. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue to do these shapes. You can do the same shapes over on the right. So we've got brow left A up. So this is in the interior. You can do brow right A up, brow right B up, and then you can do the eye right closed if you want to do that. And then in the next lesson we'll look at making the mouth shape. So I'm going to go ahead and finish out those eye shapes up here, and then we'll do the mouth shapes in the next lesson.